She was walking alone at midnight after her shift, when a stranger grabbed her arm and whispered, "Walk faster." She had no idea he was a millionaire CEO in disguise. The narrow alley behind the bustling city of Raventon was never part of Julia Mendez's usual route home. But tonight, after covering an extra shift at the 24-hour diner, the 26-year-old waitress with chestnut skin, tired hazel eyes, and curly dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail had no choice. She wore a faded denim jacket over her black work shirt and navy slacks, her sneakers scraping the uneven pavement with every weary step. It was past midnight, and the streets were eerily quiet. The soft hum of a neon sign flickered from a nearby pawnshop, casting broken colors over the sidewalk. Julia's breath formed small clouds in the cool air, and her worn canvas bag bounced against her hip. Her expression was tense, nervous, scanning every shadow. City life had taught her to be vigilant. Julia felt it before she saw it, the sudden pressure on her arm. A strong hand grabbed her elbow, and a voice, urgent and low, growled, "Walk faster." Panic exploded in her chest. She turned sharply to face him, a tall man, mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones, a clean-shaven face, light brown skin, and intense dark eyes beneath a black hooded coat. Her instinct screamed to pull away. She trembled, her eyes wide with fear, her voice caught in her throat. "Let go of me," she whispered, half command, half plea. But he didn't. "Please," he said firmly but not unkindly. "Just trust me. Walk." Julia's heart pounded in her ears. Who was this man? Why was he touching her? Her fear surged. She thought of the news stories, assaults, kidnappings, women disappearing. Was she next? Julia stumbled as she was led quickly down the alley. Her fear morphed into confusion. "Why are you doing this?" she gasped. The man glanced back. "Don't look now, but 2 men have been following you for the last 3 blocks. One pulled something out of his jacket." "I didn't like the look of it." Julia's breath hitched. She dared a glance over her shoulder and saw them. 2 figures in black, hoods up, walking fast. She hadn't even noticed. Suddenly, everything changed. The grip on her arm didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like protection. But she still didn't know who this man was, and she wasn't sure she should trust him either. They turned a corner, ducking behind a dumpster. The man peered out, checking the street. Julia stood beside him, her chest heaving, fear and disbelief etched into every muscle of her face. Finally, as silence settled, and the would-be stalkers turned away down a different street, Julia exhaled. The man stepped back from the edge and turned to her. "I'm sorry I scared you," he said. "I didn't have time to explain. My name's Marcus Denley." The name rang a strange bell in Julia's mind. She blinked. "Wait, Marcus Denley, the tech guy, the billionaire?" He nodded, slightly embarrassed. "That's what some people call me." "I prefer Marcus." Julia stared. The man who had just pulled her out of a potential attack was Marcus Denley, the 34-year-old centimillionaire who made headlines for building Denley Size, one of the fastest-growing AI startups in the country. She'd seen him on magazine covers, in tailored suits. Now here he was, in a hoodie, saving her life in an alley. "I live nearby, I walk when I can, keeps me grounded," he added. Her fear turned into a whirlwind of confusion, awe, and disbelief. They emerged from the alley into a better-lit street. Julia's shoulders slowly eased. "Thank you," she murmured. "I didn't know." Marcus gave a small smile. "You didn't need to know, I just couldn't stand by and do nothing." As they walked, she studied him. Without the expensive suit and security entourage, he looked like any other man, slightly disheveled, hoodie zipped halfway up, jeans and running shoes. But his calm presence, the way he scanned the streets, made her feel safe. "You really just walk around the city at night?" she asked. He chuckled. "More often than you'd think. I grew up here, before all the money. Sometimes I like remembering that." Julia told him about her shift, the diner, her aching feet. Marcus listened, genuinely interested. It wasn't just his wealth that surprised her, it was how present he was. As they approached a taxi stand, he turned to her. "Let me get you home." Julia hesitated at the cab stand, her instinct still wrestling with the surreal reality of what had just happened. Marcus opened the door of the cab for her, and gently gestured for her to enter. She slid into the back seat cautiously, while Marcus leaned in to speak to the driver. "Bridgepoint Terrace," she said, then looked at Marcus. "You don't have to come. I'll ride with you," he said. "Just until you're safely inside." As the taxi rolled through the sleepy streets of Raventon, Julia and Marcus sat in silence for a few moments. The city passed by, streetlights, shuttered storefronts, the occasional late-night cyclist. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you always step in like that when you see someone in trouble?" she asked. "Only when I know I can help," he replied. "Most of the time, people don't want to be saved by a stranger." Julia looked at him closely. She saw no trace of arrogance in his tone, just honesty. He seemed grounded in a way she hadn't expected from someone worth hundreds of millions. "You didn't act like a rich man back there," Marcus smiled faintly. That's because I didn't have time to. The cab pulled up to an old brick apartment building on a quiet street. Julia lived on the third floor and the windows flickered with the warm glow of night owl neighbors. She stepped out then paused. Marcus followed. You really don't have to come all the way up, she said, fishing her keys from her bag. I'll just wait here and make sure you get inside, he replied, hands in his coat pockets, his breath visible in the cool air. Julia gave him a small nod and walked to the front door. As she unlocked it, her thoughts raced about the danger, about Marcus, about how surreal it all was. She turned at the door. Would you like some coffee? She asked impulsively. I mean, as a thank you. Marcus hesitated. Only if you're okay with it, she nodded. I am. As he stepped through the door into the old building's creaky hallway, neither of them realized that the night had only just begun to change them both. Julia's apartment was modest, clean, small, and filled with cozy signs of a life lived simply. A small bookshelf lined one wall and an old couch with crocheted blankets sat near the kitchen counter. She poured water into the kettle while Marcus looked around quietly, his hands folded behind his back. You live alone? He asked. She nodded. Moved out when I was 18. My mom passed when I was a kid and my dad, well, he wasn't around much. Marcus nodded slowly. Same here. Grew up with my older brother. We made do. Julia raised an eyebrow. Hard to picture you making do. Marcus laughed lightly. It wasn't always corporate jets and boardrooms. My first bed was a mattress on the floor of a 2-bedroom with 6 people. The kettle whistled. She made the coffee and handed him a cup. He took it with a grateful smile, and they sat on opposite ends of the couch, the quiet hum of the city through the window behind them. I still don't understand, Julia finally said, sipping her drink. You could have just called the police. Why risk it? Marcus looked into his cup. Because I saw someone who needed help, and I've been the person no one helped before. As the night deepened, conversation flowed more freely. Marcus, once the mysterious man in the alley, became more human to Julia. He talked about the pressure of managing a company that employed thousands, about the loneliness of success, and the constant tug-of-war between public image and private longing. Julia, in turn, spoke of her dreams deferred, how she once wanted to be a nurse, how working nights at the diner helped pay for her community college classes, how she sometimes felt invisible in a city always rushing forward. There was a pause. You know, Marcus said quietly, most people only see the headlines. They don't care about what's underneath. I guess that makes 2 of us, she replied, offering a warm smile. It surprised them both how quickly their walls had lowered, how naturally the conversation had unfolded. Strangers hours ago, they now felt like old acquaintances reuniting in the stillness of early morning. Neither of them knew what it meant yet, but both felt the seed of something unusual, trust perhaps, or curiosity, maybe more. It was past 3 a.m. when Marcus finally stood to leave. The city outside remained still, wrapped in silence. Julia walked him to the door. Thank you again, she said, for helping me. For staying. Marcus hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim business card. This isn't about favors, but if you ever need anything, even just someone to talk to. She took the card. I don't think I've ever been walked home by a billionaire before. He chuckled. I don't think I've ever been invited into a stranger's home for coffee before. A beat passed, full of unspoken meaning. Then he stepped into the hallway, nodding gently. Good night, Julia. She closed the door softly behind him and leaned against it, the card warm in her palm. Her world hadn't changed, her job still awaited, the bills still needed paying, but something inside her had shifted, and for Marcus, walking back into the night, the city no longer felt quite so empty. Julia awoke later than usual, the early sun streaming through her thin curtains. The memory of the night before lingered like a vivid dream. She touched the business card still resting on her nightstand. Marcus Denley, founder and CEO. Denley sighs. It gleamed under the light as if daring her to believe it had really happened. At the diner, things were the same. Orders piling up, coffee pouring nonstop, tired customers grumbling about the wait. But Julia felt different. Her usual fatigue was replaced by a quiet alertness. She looked at the faces around her, wondering how many people hid stories like Marcus's behind ordinary appearances. When her friend and coworker Tanya asked why she looked like she'd seen a ghost and won the lottery, Julia just smiled. She didn't mention the man in the alley, or the late-night coffee with a billionaire. It wasn't because she didn't believe it, she did, but it felt too precious, too personal to say aloud. Back at her apartment that evening, Julia stared at the card again. Should she reach out? Would it seem desperate or ungrateful if she didn't? She placed it back on the nightstand, heart undecided but strangely full. Across town, in a penthouse of glass and steel, Marcus Denley sat on a balcony overlooking the city. His espresso sat untouched, his laptop open but ignored. He had meetings, contracts, and a growing media storm about his company's upcoming merger. But his mind wasn't on any of that, it was on Julia. He kept replaying the moment she invited him in. The conversation, the warmth in her small apartment, the way she listened without judgment. It had been years since someone had looked at him and not seen a dollar sign. His assistant Brenda interrupted with a call. "You're due in 20 minutes for the quarterly review." "I'll be there," he replied, snapping back into CEO mode. But even during the meeting, when charts and numbers filled the screen, he found himself drifting back to the woman who worked long nights and still offered him coffee. The woman who'd called him brave when she was the one walking alone through dangerous streets. There were unfinished conversations there, and he wasn't done hearing her story. 2 days passed before Julia finally made up her mind. She sat at her small kitchen table after another exhausting shift, staring at the card one last time. Her fingers hovered over her phone before she finally typed, "Hi Marcus, this is Julia, the girl from the alley, if you remember. Just wanted to say thank you again. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, hope you're doing well." She hesitated, then hit send. The reply came within 5 minutes. "Julia, I was hoping you'd message. I've been thinking about you too. I'm glad you're safe. Want to grab lunch sometime? My treat, but somewhere normal, promise." She smiled despite herself. For the first time in a long while, the idea of lunch didn't feel like a chore. It felt like something to look forward to. "Okay, but I picked the diner, and I'm paying for the coffee this time." His reply came back instantly. "Deal, but I'm leaving the tip." Julia laughed. Something was beginning. She didn't know what, but she was open to finding out. 3 days later, Marcus walked through the doors of the diner where Julia worked. It was the lunch rush, waitresses darting between tables, the kitchen clanging with plates, the air thick with the smell of frying bacon and coffee. Julia spotted him immediately. He looked out of place. Clean black sweater, expensive jeans, his watch gleaming under the fluorescent lights, but he wore a boyish smile and no trace of arrogance. Heads turned as customers recognized him. Phones came out, but Marcus kept his eyes on Julia as she led him to a booth in the corner. "You sure you want to eat here?" she teased. He looked around and grinned. Best atmosphere in town. They talked again, this time without the tension or adrenaline of a near crime. They laughed about picky customers and terrible boardroom coffee. Julia told him about her classes, and Marcus shared stories of failed startups before Denley size. They were different in every imaginable way. Upbringing, lifestyle, expectations. But for that hour, their worlds met, and in that corner booth it felt natural. Julia couldn't help but wonder, could this really be something? The moment Julia clocked out from her shift, Tanya pulled her aside, phone in hand, eyes wide. "Girl, have you seen this?" She turned the screen. A photo of Marcus and Julia sitting at the diner filled the screen of a popular celebrity news site. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO has lunch date with mystery diner waitress." Julia's stomach flipped. She read the comments, some curious, others cruel. Speculation, assumptions, envy. Her quiet little corner with Marcus was now public gossip. That evening, Julia called Marcus. "I didn't think it would get out," she said. "I didn't want this attention." "I'm so sorry," he replied, his voice calm but apologetic. "I should have anticipated this. I'll talk to my PR team. They can take it down." "No," she said after a pause. "Let them talk. I just need to know, is this real, or am I just a headline to you?" There was a long silence. Then Marcus answered quietly, seriously, "You're the only real thing I've had in a very long time." After the media frenzy erupted, Julia became the center of unexpected attention. Reporters began hovering near the diner. Customers whispered when she refilled their cups. Her manager offered to move her to the night shift again to avoid the chaos, but she declined. She didn't want to hide. Not anymore. Marcus, too, faced pressure. Board members questioned his judgment. Social media speculated endlessly. Was this a publicity stunt, a scandal? But Marcus held firm. "I won't apologize for being human," he told a reporter when asked about Julia. Julia appreciated that, but she needed to be sure she wasn't just a defiance badge on his chest. When they met again, this time in a quieter part of the city, she confronted him gently. "This thing between us, do you still want it if there are no headlines, no drama, just me?" Marcus took her hand across the table. "Julia, I liked you before anyone knew, before you even trusted me. That night it wasn't about who you were or who I was. It was about doing the right thing. Everything since then, that's been about you, not the noise." Her shoulders relaxed. For the first time since that dark alley, she felt like she was standing on solid ground. The following weeks tested them. Paparazzi followed Marcus more than ever. Julia's co-workers became both protective and inquisitive. Some friends warned her not to get attached. Men like him don't stay, they said. You're from two different worlds. But Julia stayed grounded, not in fantasy but in clarity. Marcus didn't sweep her away into some extravagant life. Instead, he kept showing up, in little ways. He'd meet her for coffee before her shifts. He offered to help pay for her tuition, but she politely declined. "Let me finish what I started," she said. Instead, he helped her study for exams in the back booth of the diner between late-night orders and refills. They grew slowly, intentionally. And every time Julia questioned whether their relationship could withstand the weight of expectation, Marcus reminded her through actions, not just words. One evening, he brought her a framed copy of the diner receipt from their first lunch together. "Proof," he joked. "You paid for the coffee." But to Julia, it wasn't just a joke. It was a symbol that their story hadn't begun in luxury, but in sincerity. 6 months after their first meeting, Marcus invited Julia to walk with him one evening. They strolled through Raventon as the sun dipped low. He led her back to the very alley where it all began. She paused, looking around. The dumpster, the flickering pawnshop sign, it was all the same, yet everything felt different. "I come here sometimes," Marcus admitted, "to remind myself why I shouldn't just live in glass towers." Julia nodded, a slow smile forming. This is where the story flipped. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "I know we come from different places. I know our paths shouldn't have crossed, but they did. And every moment since that night has made me certain." He opened the box. A simple gold band sparkled in the fading light. "I don't want to rescue you. I just want to walk beside you. Will you marry me?" Julia's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand. "Only if we keep doing this the way we started, side by side." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the city, loud and chaotic behind them, faded into quiet. They married quietly, far from the spotlight. No luxury venue, no press, just close friends, Marcus's older brother and Julia's co-workers standing barefoot on a cliff near the sea. Julia wore a simple dress, her hair loose in curls, a single flower tucked behind her ear. Marcus wore a suit without a tie, looking more like a man in love than a corporate tycoon. They exchanged vows written in the same booth where they used to meet after her shifts. And when they kissed, it wasn't a fairy tale moment. It was real, raw, earned. They moved into a small brownstone just outside the city, blending their worlds instead of abandoning either. Julia kept studying, determined to become a nurse. Marcus cut back on appearances, focusing more on mentorship and philanthropy. And every anniversary they returned to that alley. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was where fear turned into trust and trust turned into love. Julia never forgot what it felt like. The fear of that cold hand on her arm, the panic in her chest, the doubt. But she also never forgot what came after. A man who didn't need to stop but did. A night that could have ended in terror but ended in transformation. Their story became more than a headline. It became a symbol of how status doesn't define character, and how the right person doesn't arrive with fireworks but with presence, patience, and purpose. Julia eventually opened a community clinic with Marcus's support, dedicating her work to helping women and workers who often walked the same dark streets she once did. Marcus remained her partner in all things, sometimes investor, always listener, always believer. When asked years later how they met, Julia would smile and say, "He grabbed my arm in an alley, and I almost screamed. Instead, I found the safest place I've ever known." If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching stories about unexpected encounters, resilience, and the quiet power of kindness. Your next favorite story is just one click away.